Episode 11 of the Going for Broke Outdoors podcast, a podcast by an outdoorsman for other outdoorsmen. I'm your host, Jeremy Gillespie. In today's episode, we welcome Tim Bunao. Tim's a diehard archery hunter originally from upstate New York who now calls Montana home. He also happens to be my elk hunting partner and an all-around great dude. In this episode, Tim and I recap our lessons learned from our first 2 seasons hunting in the West as transplants from the Midwest and the East. We discuss our preconceptions of what we thought hunting in the West would be like and what it has actually turned out to be like. We cover lessons learned on whitetail, mule deer, antelope, and elk. We also discuss how our gear has evolved, what we now throw in our packs, and gear we wouldn't want to live without. For anyone planning your first Western hunt, you won't want to miss this episode. Speaking of planning Western hunts, guys, I have a new article on my blog with a downloadable Excel file that contains a checklist with about every item a guy can imagine he might need to plan an out-of-state hunting trip. The checklist utilizes a checkbox feature to let me know if I've packed an item or not. Once packed, there's a separate column where I can select if an item is a pack item. This is for items that I carry in my backpack, or a base camp item for items that will remain in my vehicle, cabin, or other lodging site. The checklist has formulas built in to automatically total the weight for my pack items separate from my base camp items. There's also a formula for total gear weight. This is an incredibly useful feature when trying to be mindful of gear weight on backpack hunts. The checklist also contains hyperlinks to some of my favorite pieces of gear. I'll put a link to the article in the description of this podcast, and all I'd ask for in return is that you subscribe to the YouTube channel or join my mailing list at www.goingforbrokeoutdoors.com. Before we get into today's podcast, I want to let you guys know about an incredible opportunity. Lou over at Stealth Outdoors is giving away one of Dan Infalt's new Beast Gear tree stands. The giveaway is currently running. All you need to do to enter is make a purchase from Stealth Outdoors anytime before August 17th, 2021, and you'll be entered for a chance to win a Hunting Beast gear stand. Visit www.stealthoutdoors.com to outfit your mobile hunting setup with some silencing gear and a chance to win a beast stand. If you'd like more details about the contest, you can visit Stealth Outdoors' Facebook page for more details. Today's podcast is brought to you by Backwoods Mobile Hunting Gear at www.backwoodsmobilegear.com. Backwoods Mobile Gear produces an array of products to completely customize your mobile hunting setup. Backwoods Mobile Gear's product line includes climbing aiders like their multi-step aider and Versa aider. Climb higher using the same amount of climbing sticks with the climbing aider at a fraction of the weight of an additional climbing stick. Backwoods Mobile Gear also offers a variety of Amsteel rope solutions from daisy chains for climbing sticks to Amsteel gear hangers. Replace those bulky straps and hunt-ruining metal cam buckles with buckleless and lightweight Amsteel products from Backwoods Mobile Gear. Again, check out Backwoods Mobile Gear at www.backwoodsmobilegear.com if you want your setup to be lighter, to take you higher, and keep your gear tighter. For those of you who plant food plots, the window to get your fall plantings in is rapidly closing. Head on over to Ideal Northern Edge food plot mixes at www.idealnorthernedge.com. Ideal Northern Edge has carefully created a variety of seed mixes and mineral blends to cover all of your food plot planting needs. Unique to Ideal Northern Edge is a bright color coating on the seeds that provides a visual contrast against tilled soil and helps you ensure optimal seed distribution and coverage for your next food plot planting. Visit www.idealnorthernedge.com for more information and to place your order. Now, on to the podcast. All right, this is a first. Got an in-studio guest today. Today I'm joined on the podcast by Tim Bunao. Tim is a fellow Montana transplant by way of upstate New York. I first learned about Tim via Dan Infalt's The Hunting Beast Forum, where he was a regular contributor. By chance, Tim and I both moved to Montana around the same time in early 2019. We become friends and elk hunting partners, although Tim's more the brains of the operation. He drags me along. In today's podcast, we're going to discuss our lessons learned over the past 2 seasons hunting a variety of species, including whitetail, mule deer, elk, and antelope. So, Tim, first off, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, a little different here. We're learning the equipment, and first time, like I said, I've had someone in the same room as opposed to on the phone. But I want to kick off this podcast with a story about your near fatal mistake when you decided to venture out of New York and head west for hunting. You had a bit of an unconventional choice. So why don't you tell everyone what state you were considering?
Oh, gosh. So when I first made the decision to leave New York, I kind of was really more of a whitetail frame of mind right then and there. So I started looking around at how I can hunt the premier states for whitetail. And that was Nebraska.
That was an interesting choice.
Yeah, I mean, just because you're in the corner right there. Yeah, I forget what actually area it was, but
You're probably looking at Omaha, which is like eastern Nebraska, butts up to western Iowa.
yep, that's what it was. It was Omaha, so I was looking at going in there because then you have all those whitetail states right there. So that was my first thought. So being a contributor on the Beast Forum there, I put a post up, hey, I think I'm gonna, move here, and that's when you came along and said, idiot, why don't you move to Montana? And yeah, it made me kind of sit back and think a little bit. There was a time in my life where I wanted to go to Montana, mainly because of a river runs through it, fly fishing. But yeah, I listened to you.
That's good. So at that point, even prior to moving, you'd never been to Montana at all, had you?
No, never.
It's a big leap of faith on your part.
Yeah, especially because I planned on leaving in January. So towing a car behind a U-Haul with a dog, 2 snowstorms on my way out. So, yeah, it was almost like they didn't want me to come here.
Yeah. So 2 years in, any regrets now?
Yeah, I didn't do it sooner.
Yeah, same here. So prior to moving to Montana, you had been to Colorado on one elk hunt. So you had a little exposure to Western hunting, but I'd like to know what your expectations were coming from upstate New York to Montana.
Really didn't have any expectations other than from stuff I've seen and, obviously videos and podcasts and from a little bit of what you described because, we've had conversations prior to this. So I didn't really know what to expect. I kind of expected less. And, yeah, I'm completely blown away, with the state itself.
I don't know what your first experience was like when you first entered Montana, but I actually lived in Montana briefly in 2012. And I specifically remember coming in and I was in the daylight. I got through the Badlands in western North Dakota, and then I got into Montana, and instantly I started seeing deer and antelope just about everywhere. Did you come in at night, or did you have the same kind of experience?
Same thing, actually. I wanted to come in so I could see. I think I got to Dickinson, and I pulled over and slept, basically because I wanted to see what Montana looked like. I want to see that the Welcome to Montana sign, and yeah, exactly what you said. Just getting past the Badlands, just getting into that eastern part of Montana, all of a sudden it was like antelope, mule deer, then you hit the river, it's like whitetail, the car swerving on the back, like get it together, man, get it together.
For sure. And when I moved in 2012, it was kind of the same situation. I'd never been to Montana ever. I'd heard about it, read about it, and just kind of took a leap of faith and moved out. And I mean, it wasn't long after just getting into the state, but not long after I started my job, I was like, oh yeah, I made the right decision. I felt like I was home.
That right there too, it feels like you belong. I guess maybe that's just the sportsman aspect of it, just because it's endless. But yeah, it just feels like home.
So today's podcast, we've picked up quite a bit of knowledge over the last 2 years. We were both admittedly very green coming into Western hunting. Tim had been on his Colorado elk hunt, and I had hunted Montana in 2017 as a non-resident. I did an elk hunt in September and a mule deer hunt in November, but I was hunting with friends that were locals, and we hunted public land, but they knew the areas pretty well, so I was basically on a guided hunt. So we were real green, but over the last 2 years, I think we've learned quite a bit, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So one of the things I think we both changed our views on is learning new areas. Talk to me about your perceptions prior to coming to Montana about what you needed to do versus what we do now. Like, what did you think was going to happen as far as the hunting and packing your gear in and stuff versus what the reality has turned into for us? And then go ahead and you can start on elk.
Yeah, for elk, I kind of had the whole entire perception of the same thing I took going to Colorado, getting back off the trailhead as far as possible, just trying to walk people, I guess you'd say, or, then you got the competition between guides and, anybody on horseback and, all that kind of stuff. So the first, perception of it, was narrowing down areas, where you can get away from there. And of course, being here in the wintertime, there's a lot of, build up and a lot of e-scouting that took place. And everything that I looked at was definitely, anything high peaks, north facing slopes, your usual stuff that you want to look forward to. Over the 2 years, we've both discovered that not all elk are high country elk. Most of them, well, I shouldn't say most of them, but they're a highly adaptable animal. So they're kind of spread out all over the place.
And when we talk about what's probably our bread and butter, the animal we're most familiar with, because you've done a fair amount of whitetail hunting, that inferior species. And that's an inside joke me and Tim have. I ask him why he doesn't hunt mule deer out here. He can shoot whitetails anywhere. But anyways, I still love hunting whitetails too. But talk about what your experience has been like, or what you expected coming from New York, and then what's actually happened since you've been here.
The expectations on a whitetail, go at it just like normal in the east. Watch your access and your exit. Scout. And what I've learned is, I think you still got to scout, but you don't have to be as intrusive. Your glassing opportunity out here is phenomenal, especially river bottom areas. You can see for miles, so you don't even have to really get off the road too far to see some of these bottoms. Just getting a high vantage point alone, you can figure stuff out, see what's down in there, see if it's worth it, and then dive in.
I think something that we've talked about a lot is because there's so much opportunity in the state, especially in September. Most people are out hunting elk if they're serious bow hunters. Some people get sheep tags or goat tags, so they're off chasing that. Then there's a lot of mule deer hunters as well. So whitetails are farther down the totem pole than they are in most of the East or the Midwest. So for the archery hunting, I think you'd agree, I found the pressure to be low to non-existent for whitetail hunting early season.
Yeah, I think that we are probably the closest to seeing what a whitetail acts like in unpressured areas.
Yeah, I would agree 100%.
It's pretty phenomenal. When you're driving down the road at 2:00 in the afternoon and there's deer on their feet feeding in the wide open, coming back from New York, those things are in bed or in the timber a half hour before sunup.
Yeah, I know on several occasions I've seen pretty good bucks bedded out in the middle of alfalfa in the afternoon. Like you said, that never happened in Michigan. And then moving on to antelope. So obviously neither one of us had ever hunted antelope. You coming from New York, myself coming from Michigan. And you drew a tag the first year, or actually you bought an over-the-counter tag, right? Like a surplus tag?
Yeah. Actually, the first year, there was like
I think it was like 500 tags left
500 tags left over for the 900.
This is a sore subject for me because Tim got one in my FWP, which is Fish, Wildlife, and Parks account. It said I purchased one, and then it never awarded me one, and I called them, and they could care less. But
I got the last one.
Yeah, Tim must have got the last one. But you learned a lot that first year, I think, and I don't know. I don't think I tagged along on any of the antelope hunts the first year.
No, you didn't. I forgot what you had going on. I think you might have been all about mule deer right then and there.
Yeah, I don't know what was going on, but I didn't make it out that, or Shauna was making me go hiking. Probably is more likely.
Probably. Yeah, you guys are probably in Yellowstone.
But talk about the first year. I mean, because you're green, right? You've read some stuff online. We both have. But I don't know. What was your experience like, and what did you learn that first year? What were the big takeaways from that first year antelope archery hunting?
Yeah, I mean, like besides, what you can read about, spot and stalk. I'm a big spot and stalk person. Sitting in a blind just didn't appease me. That's another thing, or another reason why I want to move out here, because of the spot and stalk opportunity. You can spot and stalk almost any animal here. The terrain allows it. But antelope, didn't know nothing about them. I think you and I both agree that every single antelope looked the same.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's hard to judge them.
Yeah, so that definitely wasn't even on the radar, but just trying to figure them out. I think my biggest help was actually Andy May. I talked to him a few times about it, and he gave me some pointers. And after, I don't know, maybe a dozen so failed attempts, things started clicking together. They'll let you get in 100 yards, especially the non-pressured that first archery season. Those first 2 weeks, they'll let you get within 100 yards, but after that, they're all on you. That first year, Started getting closer. The first areas I started picking out, they just weren't. They didn't have the terrain. Skip ahead. That's the biggest learning. Thing I learned about is you need the terrain.
Yeah, and I think what Tim's saying specifically is you see a lot of antelope out here. They're a prairie creature, and you see a lot of them on like table flat, sage flats. And with a bow, there's just no way you can make that happen. So we started, Tim did, and then last year we picked up where Tim left off after the first year, but started really keying on areas that had some rolling hills and terrain where you could work a draw behind the herd, move up closer to them. And that seemed to make a huge difference for opportunities.
Yeah, that helped out a lot. That first year, I did get a shot off. I did get within 20 yards of a buck.
Yeah, what happened there?
Oh, jeez. I boogie-manned him. I came up on the backside of a knoll. I glassed him for like a mile away. He had, a handful of does with him. There was a sharp little knoll. I got up on the backside of it. I kind of just laid down and crawled up, and I could see the does. I knew he was still there, so I didn't know what to do. So I just kind of like laid on my back, drew, and kind of spun around, got on my knees, and it was instant. As soon as I popped that knoll, his eyes, well, obviously they can see like right behind him almost. But he turned around, spun, looked at me, and gone.
You had another adventure too that first year, right? Talk about your first hands and knees rattlesnake encounter.
So I ran into one rattlesnake the first, it might have been the second weekend out. I actually walked out to a point, glassed. I turned around, I took one step and one cold right up. And he was literally right next to my boot track in the dirt. So that was kind of nerve-wracking, especially the worst part is the walk back through the sage. You're on edge, and everything looks like a snake. So, and then I think it was the following weekend, I was spotting stalking an antelope. I was crawling up on him, and I just happened to look. I'm on my hands and knees. I looked in the sagebrush in front of me, and as soon as I saw it, it got alarmed, and that thing just cold right up. I've never jumped to my feet so quick, like it was immediately up on my feet and just turned around and just walked out. The stalk was done. I was done for the day. I think it was almost, half a mile walk back through the sage flats. And then that was nerve wracking the whole entire way back through. But yeah, I had, 2 encounters of rattlesnakes that year. And the one that was within 3-4 feet of my face.
Yeah, that's real scary. So the big takeaways for antelope are rolling terrain if you're going to spot and stalk.
Definitely.
And if you're crawling on your hands and knees, put your bow out in front of you, right? Put your bow out first.
The other thing would be a local that has befriended me calls it coyoting them. So your terrain, you definitely have to use your terrain, but don't lock yourself don't make a move on them, and that's not going to allow you to double back and make a second move. Try to leave a couple options open, because they have no rhyme to reason on what they're doing pretty much. So that's one thing I was doing is I was just kind of like, okay, they're going over here, so I'd go. And then I'd be, locked down. I couldn't go anywhere. And then I started, using the terrain a little bit more, staying more patient instead of trying to go right in for the kill, following them a little bit more, waiting for them to get into a position that I could, close that final distance on it. And that's been the biggest part. I think that's where you and I got, we kind of got ourselves into.
Yeah, last year I think, again, I didn't hunt with Tim the first year, but last year I filmed Tim. The video's actually on the YouTube channel, and Tim shot a real nice buck last year. But one of the things I learned just filming Tim and watching him was how he was using the terrain and being real patient, because actually it was the first buck that's in the video. We spotted that buck, or Tim spotted it. I don't remember who spotted it. Somebody spotted the buck, and it was a good hour and a half, 2 hours. We used the terrain, worked around, took our time. The antelope ended up bedding down, and then we moved in real slow, and Tim got a shot off there. And then kind of that didn't go so well, but that's all right. It's we'll blame that one on whatever brand rangefinder you were using at the time.
Bushnell.
Yeah, so Bushnell gave him some erratic readings, and that didn't end well, but it was a good experience. And then the buck that Tim actually ended up killing, well, why don't you go ahead and tell the story and the patience and the terrain in there in that story?
Yeah, so Jeremy and I, we decided to go try a new spot. We started, the terrain features. we started looking for more specific ones. We got to this little area, and it actually looked pretty bleak at first. We didn't see anything. I think we moved one coulee over, and then we finally spotted him, and shoot, what was he, like 800 yards?
It was a long ways.
So we kind of like sat back for a couple minutes and looked at the topography, tried to figure out, what to do. And I mean, we couldn't have been there for more than 5-10 minutes before we decided to make to try to get a little bit closer, go in one specific direction.
Yep. Close the distance.
So we closed the distance where we disappeared. And then when we popped up to where he should have been, he wasn't there. And the terrain worked out great, but so we're kind of like, he must have gone off the other way. And then like, what was it? Just seconds later, all of a sudden, Jeremy's like, there he is.
When we originally spotted that, like Tim said, that antelope, he was probably 800 yards away. And it was funny because that morning, Tim was telling me he had hunted the year prior. And this was like maybe the second time I'd been out with him. He was telling me about how they were kind of random compared to a deer. They would just mill around in an area, but when they decided to move, they'd cover a big distance. And we had seen this buck, and he was just kind of milling around. So we were trying to close to the next good ridge, which was about 300 yards away. And I don't even think we were halfway there.
No.
Or maybe close. Maybe we had went 200 yards, and this buck was 800 yards away. And I look over, and the buck's 70 yards away. So he'd went 600 yards in the same time it took us to go 200 and surprised us.
Yeah, he surprised us. Tried to make a move on him. Didn't get super aggressive with him because he was actually working into terrain that was even more, in our favor. So yeah, we doubled back around to try to get, one, keep the wind in our favor, two, to try to get into a better position. We had just crossed a deep creek, basically a washout kind of a deal, and
dry creek bed.
And I knew that if we can get back to that, then that basically went the whole entire width of the public land. So if we can get that before he, got close and we get eyes on him, then we could get down in there and could, close the distance, try to cut him off super quick. And that's basically what happened.
And then talk about the decoy and how you had that set up, because I think without a decoy there, that would have been real sketchy. It was sketchy even with the decoy.
Right. So I used the Stalker Decoy, and I put it around my camera and mounted it around the tripod. So that is one thing that I did find with that Stalker Decoy is if it's really windy, that thing's like a sail. But using it on a tripod, obviously it's not attached to your bow, but you can still hide behind it. And so that got his attention, and it kept him calm for a couple of minutes, enough to get a trustworthy range on him.
I think you had upgraded rangefinders at that point too, right?
Yeah, after that one miss, I think I had a new rangefinder that following evening.
Yeah, and real quick, for people that aren't familiar with Stalker Decoy, they're made by Ultimate Predator Gear. You can look them up. It's basically a canvas silhouette, but instead of staking them into the ground, you can mount them to your bow, or Tim had his mounted to a tripod. And then they have a little window cut out in the body, so if it's mounted to your bow, you can see your sight pins, and obviously it's a shoot-through window for your arrow. So that's the Stalker Decoy, and what Tim said, when it's mounted on your bow, if it's windy, and it's windy in Montana quite often, it can make the shooting a lot tougher because, like you said, it's like having a sail on your bow.
Yeah, that's for sure. The decoy, kept him calm enough, kept his interest, and allowed me to get a good range on him. And unfortunately, I think between the camera, being in there, and my movement, I kind of got into the feeling that he wasn't all about it, and he was going to try to circle. It made him move a little bit more, but made the shot, and he went 15 yards. And it's 45-yard shot. He went 15 yards, and we both got to put our hands on an antelope.
Yep, first one that I'd seen. So that was pretty awesome.
Yep.
Well, let's move
Your
on.
turn now.
Yeah, we're going to move on to mule deer. So this is the superior species for anybody that's wondering.
Goodness gracious.
Anyways, mule deer. So what have I learned about mule deer in the last 2 years? I learned a little bit in 2017. Like I said, I hunted with friends. We hunted public land, but that was essentially a guided hunt where those guys were pointing me in areas that they knew historically had deer. And my first observation was there's absolutely no way there's deer out here because the area that we hunted had very little timber, to the point that I thought these guys were playing a joke on me. And I just didn't know any better. I didn't know much about mule deer. So if you're doing your e-scouting or your Onyx map, don't necessarily rule an area out if it doesn't have a lot of timber. What it does need, if it doesn't have a lot of timber, though, is terrain. So you need coulees, washes, cuts, and the bigger systems seem to be better from what I've experienced.
It seems like the steeper coulees, anything that might be, that north face to give them, some shade, but that steeper stuff, and that's something I haven't dove into yet, but something that you definitely have way more experience with than I do.
Like I said, the bigger drainage systems seem to be better for deer numbers and the size of deer. And obviously, just like hunting anything else, a lot of people out here seem to, not a lot of people, I don't want to stereotype too bad. There's a fair amount of road hunters, though, because you can actually shoot a pretty nice buck out here during rifle season, driving around and then spot a mule deer, and it's legal to just get out of the truck and shoot one. So a lot of people do that, but I like to hike and I like to hunt deeper. And when you get a mile off the road or more into some of those bigger drainages, that's really when you start seeing the good deer numbers and generally the bigger, better bucks.
Especially after you already shot a buck and you're back in your vehicle.
Yeah. So good story. I don't think I've told the story on the podcast.
You haven't.
Okay. So last year, it was Labor Day weekend, and I went to hunt an area that I'd hunted the previous year. So the first year, 2019, that we were out here, I shot a small 2-year-old mule deer buck with my bow, and people are probably thinking, like, why'd you shoot a small buck with your bow? In September, too, or maybe it was October. It was like the first week of October. But I'd never shot a mule deer with my bow, and I was just having a super fun hunt, and it came in at 8 yards. I shot it off the ground, no blind or anything. So it was just a cool experience. Couldn't pass it up. So last year, I went back to that same area because I'd actually seen a really big deer in there, which is kind of makes it even funnier that I ended up shooting a small one, but I didn't care. I was having a good time.
That's all that matters.
That's all that matters.
Yeah.
So I went back to see if this deer had made it because unlike Michigan, Montana, the deer actually survive a season sometimes. So I went back to that area this year, and the first time I was over there, I ended up spotting this really nice buck. Well, actually, before that, I'd seen a few whitetails because there's whitetails and mule deer in this area, like there is in a lot of Montana. So I end up spotting this really big mule deer. I see it in the binos. It's like 200 yards away, and I have probably an hour of daylight. I was just starting to work back to the truck. I was about 3 miles out, so I was like, well, I'll work back. And it was only the first day of my long weekend. I had like 3 or 4 days to hunt. I ended up moving in to a sagebrush, and I was about 90 yards away from the deer, and there was like a dry creek bed that was just grass, no terrain between me and him, and he was on the other side of it, and I basically just sat there and glassed him, and I was hoping he'd come my way. I had a great wind, no other deer around, and then after about 5 minutes, he got super spooky and ran off. I thought, that's super weird. Maybe saw a coyote or something, and I was on public land, so I looked behind me, and this property's got like a hillside that runs through it, and there was a guy skylined on the hillside walking through it. Prime time, so I can't blame him. Public land, that happens. But anyways, this big mule deer runs off. And I actually called Ryan Anderson, who's a friend of ours, locked down from the Hunting Beast. Ryan's been on the podcast twice now. And I said, Ryan, he's hunted in South Dakota. What should I know about mule deer in September? And he told me to wait it out. A lot of times whitetails are bed early. He said mule deer will come back to bed late, or they'll bed early, and then they'll get up and bed a second time. So, okay. I go back to the same area the following morning, and I'm getting a little discouraged because it's 8:39 and it'd been getting light out at like 6:30 because it was early season. And then I hear a buck grunt, and I thought, wow, that's super weird. September, buck grunt. I haven't hunted in September a lot, but usually don't hear grunting that early. So I look over, and it's the same mule deer from the day before. I can't believe it. And he ends up coming my way, beds down at 75 yards, and he was in a little patch of smaller cottonwoods, like 12-inch diameter cottonwoods. There was 8 or 9 of them, and there was no wind that morning, so I just had to wait him out. And about an hour later, the wind started blowing. I crept into 55 yards, and there was just no more cover. It was just grass. So I creep into 55 yards, and I have one tree, so I'm behind this tree. I range the deer about 100 times, and it's 55 yards. An hour later, he stands up, and I think he starts walking on a diagonal kind of away from me. And then I ran into the Tim problem. He got in tall grass, like mid-chest, and I was ranging him, and I kept getting all these erratic readings, like 10, 15 yards apart. And he was about 55 when he was bedded. But then I was getting readings like 71, 51, 63, and I thought he'd moved away, so I ended up shooting it for 60 yards. And I basically haircut him, and turned out when I went to where he was standing and ranged the tree I shot from, he was still exactly 55. So shot a little high. That was a bummer. The good part of the story, though, and I think this is where you're going.
This is where I was going to get at.
So the following weekend, I go over to the same area to try to shoot this deer again, and ended up seeing a whitetail that I couldn't quite pass. So I shoot this whitetail, and it was a nice 5x5, like a 120, no monster, but good solid buck, and I was happy with it. And I get the deer corded up because I shot it in the evening, loaded it in my truck, and I'm driving out of this property because it's got like an access road through it. And the same deer that I missed the week before literally walked across the road in front of me in my headlights. So long story short, I'm hoping he's still alive and I can get after him this year.
Yeah, hopefully. But one thing, another thing about spot and stalk, you got to have at least a little trust in your own yardage judgment.
Yeah, we found that out a few times now. You can't be 100% relied on the rangefinder, which is difficult, especially if you're taking shots over, for me, anything over 30 yards, and I get a little worried about not having accurate range.
Yeah, I mean, that and it's super difficult because there's no landmarks. There's no trees in between and this and that, to go, okay, well, that's 20. Okay, that next tree over there is another, 10. So, we're at 30. So it's got to be about that 35. There's nothing like that.
Another thing you talked about last year, maybe it was 2019, and it was a good point. I never really thought about it, but coming from the East or the Midwest, you're so used to having a visual of a deer-sized body that when you were looking at antelope, a smaller body, it's harder to range. Again, no landmarks and a different sized body. So I guess one tip that I would say is anyone that's planning on coming on an antelope hunt, to the extent you can, get either a paper silhouette or a 3D target or something that's life size and get used to looking at that for range estimation.
Yep. Or even do your practice when you're out driving the roads glassing for that summer velvet. Look at some of the smaller does. Try to estimate, how far that is and take your rangefinder with you. That could be a huge help.
Yeah, we talked about that. I think it seems like about a 1.5-year old whitetail doe in the East or Midwest is about the size of an antelope buck, about 110 pounds, 120 pounds, somewhere around there.
For sure, yeah. They seem a lot bigger on TV, but once you see them in life, they're like, wow, that's a
lot smaller.
Yeah, not a big target.
So that's like a brief overview of our experiences with elk, antelope, and mule deer. We're going to get into the weeds a little bit more, but I know another area our thinking has evolved quite a bit is when it comes to gear. So let's start out about talking about your gear list, maybe when you went to Colorado, what was in your pack on that elk hunt versus what you take on a typical elk hunt in Montana now.
Well, Colorado, that was my first trip. And what took to Colorado, maybe about a quarter of it I would take with me on a hunt now.
Give me some items that you packed then that you would not pack now.
One thing I learned, if you're going to be hunting with a buddy, split the weight up. There's no reason to take 2-spotter scope. 2 spotters. One person with a pair of binos and a spotter's, sufficient. You can even break it down to, one person carry the stove and one person carry the fuel. Kind of a deal. It is kind of a pain. Kind of waiting for, the other person's water to boil. But yeah,
it's also a pain carrying 5 or 10 extra pounds.
I'm trying to think of like the Colorado trip. I mean, I had a full-on medical kit, prepared for the worst. I had glow sticks, in case I was successful. The game bags I had were, cheap Walmart game bags. You hear a lot of people talk about weight, and it is something that you really pay attention to. And at that point in time too, that was kind of like pretty much the prime of like my physical capability. I was kind of like getting really into my stride, and 10 days of carrying that stuff around. I think it was like 60. I think it was like 65 pounds. My bag was, and it was, the bag didn't fit. I think I had
what kind of bag were you using then?
A Horn Hunter full curl.
Okay, and then you got a Kifaru now, right?
And I got a Kifaru now.
Let's go on a little tangent here. Let's say you got a limited budget and you've got $1,000, which I don't think is unreasonable for people that are thinking about gearing up for a Western hunt.
Nope.
What's your top 3 things you're spending money on if you got that kind of money? What's super important to you now?
Boots and bag. Boots, bag, and then probably, make sure my, I have a decent base layer. That would probably be my first 3, but, tarp or your sleeping bag. Never mind. Yeah, something to sleep in. If you're not sleeping comfortable, you're gonna wake up groggy. You're gonna wake up irritable, and it's just gonna be you're not gonna be in the right mind frame to carry on that day, especially the grind. It's as we both know, it's a grind.
It's a grind.
So the feet, taking care of your feet, that's where the boots come into play, especially coming from the east. Even I'm from the Adirondack region, so I still have that steep terrain, but nothing like the grades that you see around here.
I think the big difference is too, there's a difference between a 1 or 2 mile access, then you sit down for 3 or 4 hours for your hunt, and then you got a 1 or 2 mile hike out, versus out here where there's been a couple days, I know for a fact we've put on 12, 13 miles in the mountains, and at the end of the day, if your boots aren't good, your feet are screaming anyways, but if you got bad boots on, you're in for a real rough hunt.
Yeah, especially, you're coming from out there and you get hit day 1, and day 1 is always the worst. Pretty much. Other than the fact that you're jacked up, that you're finally there and getting up, but I think that's when you have too much adrenaline or too much juice going into it, so you could probably burn yourself out a little bit more, and you mess up your feet, or your feet start hurting on day 1, and you're there for 7-10 days. You're just gonna slowly decline after that. It's not gonna get easier.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I don't know any other way to describe it other than pacing. And exactly what you said, you feel the urge, especially if you're coming as a non-resident. It's overwhelming to get out there and just pound ground, but you got to think of the long haul and the big picture. Maybe you can hike 10, 12 miles that first day, but you'd be a lot better off doing 6 or 7 or 8 and saving some gas in the tank.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's key right there, just saving some gas in the tank. And then the pack there, that horn hunter did not fit me whatsoever. So carrying that 65 pounds was, absolutely miserable. I was kind of walking at with a slight slant in my back. I wasn't standing upright. And that's when I decided to go with the Kafaru there. And, I contacted, someone over there and talked to him about my torso and all that, and got fitted for it. And yeah, carrying 65 pounds with that thing, it's like 30 pounds,
Yeah, game changer.
Yep.
Just like the boots.
Yep. You can definitely do it. You don't have to go out and buy, the Crispies or the kind of tracks and stuff like that, especially if you're going to do it once a year. I can see that. But even back east, I got mine back before I even, came out here. And it just made those hikes even better.
Yeah. Can't say enough about a good boot or a good bag. So you also mentioned your base layers. What about glass? Out west especially. I guess I'm picking on you there because I feel like boots are super important, and I definitely want a pack that fits, but my number 3 item would definitely be, because I'm tempted to say glass is number 1, but if your feet are messed up or you can't carry your bag, then your hunt's over on day 1. So glass probably makes sense at number 3. But I used binoculars in Michigan. I carried them semi-regularly in a tree stand, and I always had them in my truck for glass and leading up to the season. But out here, I think I'd be lost without them. I'm using glass every hunt all the time.
For sure. I just think, I guess my top 3, I'm thinking about keeping myself in for the long haul. But yeah, you definitely need at least binos.
Yeah, so let's talk about that too. I think that's something, one of the misconceptions I had on my first Western hunt is that I definitely needed a spotting scope. I don't think that's the case anymore. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I don't think you really need to. That's gonna be all your region specific. If you e-scout a spot that have 4 parks in it.
Real quick, explain to people that don't know the lingo. What's a park?
Wally World. A park is basically a meadow. I don't know the reason for it being called a park.
I don't either.
I guess for us Easterners, it's a meadow.
It'd be like a grass grazing area within the timber, a timberless area within the timber,
right,
where they all come out to graze.
Right. So, to me, unless you're going to be in a spot where you're going to be at a good glassing point where you can see multiple, I just don't see, carrying a spotter the extra weight all the way for it when you could probably just get away with using, a good pair of binos. Especially, it depends on if you're in heavy timbered or if you're in like, we'll say like eastern Montana, southwest Montana, or up north. It just depends on the terrain. I still don't think I'd carry a spotter.
My expectations in reality were kind of reversed. I thought I was going to need the spotter on the elk hunt all the time, and now I'd rather carry it on the deer hunt because some of the areas that I mule deer hunt, like I said, they're not very heavily timbered, and it's real helpful to have the spotter so you can check out a buck a mile or two away sometimes and get eyes on it and see if that's something that you want to go after, or if that's kind of a borderline buck. Saves you a lot of walking in the deer hunting areas that I found for mule deer specifically, but obviously for whitetail, you don't need a spotter.
That's another thing I guess you'd say, for the spotter. If you are up in, high country for elk, as opposed to using just binos, some of those parks might be far enough away where you can't really tell, if that bull is something you want to go after. I mean, to me too, if I was on a, an out-of-state hunt, non-resident hunt, if I can make out that it was a bull, I'm going after him. Kind of a deal,
100%.
But if it's something, along the lines of, if I wanted to see what kind of bull that is, that's where you might, have the advantage of having that spotter with you to save yourself the legs of going those extra, that extra mile or two in that mountain terrain just to get binos on them to see like, okay, well, this isn't something I want to go after.
Yeah, I would rather carry a good 10 or 12 power bino with a light tripod, because I think stabilized, your binos actually do a real good job, than I would carry a big spotting scope around, because again, if you're not being super picky about what you're going after, I think that's more where the spotting scope comes in for me, is like if I'm looking for a certain class of animal, which being so new, I'm usually not.
Right. Yeah, and even raghorns, man, like you can tell a rag. Like, when he swings his head up, like you see those things,
Yeah, exactly. So, well, that's good. So we talked about boots, we talked about bag, talked about binos versus spotting scope. Let's talk about what's in your bag now. So those are like our main items. And I think maybe we should preface this with, we've gotten away from what you said, the Colorado, like the week-long, 10-day backpack type hunt mode. And we've got into more day hunts or overnights or maybe 2-day hunts. So the bag looks a little different in that situation. So what are you carrying now?
Water, some snacks throughout the day. Just I have a light tarp just in case we get into an area that you want to post up and wait for them in the morning. Obviously the kill kit's in there, and your bow. Really, we're not far enough away that we couldn't make it back to the truck to reload our packs and stuff like that. So and that's just been another thing that has been a huge learning experience, of moving out here and what was perceived to what you're supposed to do as what can really be done.
Yeah, expectation versus reality. I think I definitely had the same idea. I need to get 5 miles back in the timber past where everybody's at, and that's where all the elk are going to be holed up. But so last year, here's a prime example. So Tim and I were in a permit unit last year, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But it's an area not everyone can hunt. You have to draw the tag, and we're driving up for the first evening, and right before we turned to where we're going to camp on public land, I spotted a bull. Not even a mile off the road, and a really nice bull too.
He was a giant.
It was a giant bull. So that goes to show you, and this is a main or fairly main access road into that area.
Yep.
And there's this bull with 8 or 9 cows.
Yep.
A mile off the road. You can't just like deer end up in some low pressured places where you wouldn't think. I think elk do the same things.
Yep. That's kind of what I've learned from talking with locals and listen to a few different people within the podcast. Is put it this way: you have everybody. Well, everybody thinks what we did, and we thought too. We have to go back deep, and then you have your people who won't. Okay, so the people who won't, what's their max? They're going about a mile, 2 miles. The people who who want to go back as far as they possibly can. The stories of I packed them out from 15 miles back and stuff like that on my feet. So those guys are going back 6-7 miles. Well, what's going on in between there? There's a lot of good looking land in between stuff, but people won't go because I got to go back. I have to go all the way back there. So I think what happens is, like, not saying that those elk aren't way in the back, but I think, they just get kind of pushed into, it's just like a whitetail, pushed into a little buffer zone.
They could be way in the back, but they could be in the middle too. And we found on quite a few occasions that they have been. Okay, so we kind of got off on a tangent earlier when we were talking about whitetails, but I had some more specific questions for you about your experiences coming from New York now to Montana. And we touched on this a little bit, but so you love to archery hunt. So you've been archery hunting during gun season. So I want to kick this off by starting a discussion about hunting pressure and compare and contrast New York and Montana archery and then hunting archery during Montana's gun season.
The comparison between New York and Montana whitetail archery season, there is no comparison. There's absolutely no comparison. I think it partially has to do with the deer density. We have a really good population here, especially when you find those pockets. There's some really good pockets there. The archery season, definitely less pressure. Most of the time in that September time frame, my focus has been on elk, and it probably will be until I get that elusive bull down on the ground. But there's times where I've been able to slip away during the week, and on the weekend, I had some buddies coming to town, so I got out in the morning and stuff like that. But there's no pressure on those bottoms whatsoever. You don't see anybody really keying in for them. The rifle season is nothing like New York. There's not the Orange Army. I've been hunting specific areas throughout rifle season with my bow. I haven't seen a single person doing a drive. I haven't seen any of that kind of stuff. Actually, I hardly heard any shots.
So let's back up and put it in perspective. Think back to as many archery hunts as you can during archery season. How many other archery hunters have you seen?
You'd have to say probably you'd run into 1 to 2 people every 3 hunts, at least walk by you. Or, you'd hear them and, stuff like that.
There's 1 or 2 guys out there, but it's not.
Or are you talking about here or Montana? Or, New York?
No, I was talking about Montana. All your archery deer hunts during archery season, how many other hunters have you seen?
Let me add this up. 0.
0. Okay, I was a little surprised when you said 1 every couple hunts. So that was New York.
Yeah, that was New York.
Okay.
Yeah, there's your comparison right there.
Yeah. And then what about, I know the one hunt specifically when you shot your buck last year, you said you saw 1 or 2 other gun hunters, right? Or was that on the other piece?
No, that was the first year.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the first year. I did see hunters last year. That's the guy that shot the doe, or the guy and the girl that shot the doe and left her in the field.
Okay.
That was like the only time I've ever seen hunters, and that's what I saw.
Yeah. So night and day difference. And I like to think about it like this too, because I'm a numbers guy, so it makes sense to me to think about a lot of things in numbers. I think New York is real similar to Michigan. I know Michigan, the figures vary, but there's anywhere between 650,000 and 750,000 rifle hunters, and I think it's comparable in New York.
Pretty much.
And then in Montana, the population of the entire state is 1.1 million, and Montana is also, I believe, the 4th biggest state. So you've got a way bigger state.
I think it's the 5th.
Is it? Okay, 5th. Well, it's in the top 5.
Right.
So you got the 4th or 5th biggest state with one of the smaller populations, and I believe the most public land of the lower 48 states.
I think so.
So when you add all those factors in, there's a lot of area to hunt. And then when you factor in too, I like to think about things, and I don't know this for a fact, but it makes sense logically. A lot of locals are hunting private lands because they have friends or family that are ranchers or landowners. So the public land is pretty low pressure out here, which is great. That's a big reason why I moved out here to begin with.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing, as New York or anywhere else. You still got to put a little bit of work just for, I guess you'd say, the quality. You can put in no work whatsoever, and I guarantee you're still going to come across deer. But an older buck is an older buck, and you're still going to find those those little pockets that are more of their key terrain, or habitat.
Yeah, definitely not a booner behind every tree. And what I've noticed with the whitetail, and I think you have too, is that there's a lot of good solid bucks. There's a lot of like 120 to 135, maybe 140, and then anything above 140 it kind of gets rare. Not that they're not out there, but it seems like even the mature bucks, a lot of them are around that 130, 140 mark.
anything above that 150 mark, they're definitely here, but they're not behind every other tree. You still got to,
You're going to look for those.
do your due diligence and really, get out and look for them.
Let's talk about habitat. So briefly, what kind of habitat did you hunt primarily in New York, and what are you hunting out here for whitetails?
Big blocks of timber, 1,200 acres of, just continuous, mountain region, looking for white oaks and, creek bottom crossings and your typical hill country, whitetail habitat. And now I'm hunting maybe 50 by 100 yard wide strips of timber.
Way different.
Yeah, way different. They are thick. I mean, a lot of these pockets, or areas are extremely thick, especially with Russian olive and stuff like that. But there's no white oaks to key in on. A lot of these animals are still they're feeding on natural browse.
And I think it's no secret, but if people are considering a deer hunt for whitetails in Montana, water's king, right?
Water is king for everything.
What I mean about that is creeks, rivers, lakes. If you don't have water and some sort of habitat, like Tim was talking about, Russian olives, brushy, some sort of timber, there's vast expanses of Montana that don't have any of that stuff. So if you're looking for a deer hunt, you can rule most of that stuff out. Not that there will never be a white-tailed deer in there, but it's pretty rare.
Yeah, they are obviously they're still in the mountain regions and stuff like that. And I don't know if you have, but actually, you know what? You found that whitetail shed up in the coulee type areas where the ponderosas.
Yeah, so what Tim's saying is there are definitely whitetails in some of those areas, but those have some timber and they might not be along a river bottom, but there's water sources within those areas. So they're not really mountain whitetails and they're not really river bottom whitetails, but there are some whitetails that occupy that middle zone, like you said. So let's compare and contrast the deer numbers. So if you're coming from New York, explain how many deer you might see on a typical hunt or a series of hunts, how many bucks, and then how's that compared to what you're seeing out here?
So we'll go like your early October. New York might see one small buck a hunt and maybe a couple of does. I can't really compare because I've only been out early October once here, but that time I want to say that was like 8 or 9 does. One doe crossed my entrance, blew, went back to bedding, then immediately turned back around and fed through. Blew again while she was blowing. 3 other deer came from another area and just walked through like what is this deer doing? Kind of a deal. And they just kept on going. Now the rut, you might see 1 or 2 bucks in New York on an archery set. That was some of the your better pinches. That's what I always kind of focused on in New York was the pinches close to doe bedding. You might see 1 or 2 cruisers. Last year, my best day, I had 19 bucks come by.
Yeah.
So
that's absolutely ridiculous. And how many of those, I know you were being a little more selective last year, but of those 19 deer, if you saw those same 19 deer in New York, how many of those would you have shot?
14 of them.
So a little bit different. I mean, you got into a good area. Of course, it's not always like that, but it goes back to what you said earlier, that the deer out here, I feel like are about as close to what they would act like in the absence of hunting pressure as I've ever seen.
Yeah, for sure.
And I've hunted quite a few different states now, so it's different. It's a little different. It's weird.
It's definitely different. I mean, obviously, within hunting, nothing's a slam dunk, but whatever you're going for, your opportunity's there for sure.
And last thing I want to talk about on the whitetail topic is coming from New York, coming from Michigan. We're both heavy tree stand hunters. I didn't do hardly any ground hunting. I did a little, but I had never shot a buck off the ground in Michigan. And I think both of us now, especially with the spot and stalk and being out here, we're doing a lot more ground hunting. So you mixed in quite a bit of tree stand hunting, but talk about that and your 2019 buck you shot off the ground, right?
Yep. Actually, I've taken 2 bucks. My best buck in PA. That was my first buck, actually. I took him off the ground. And then, the 2019 buck, that was just still hunting the bottoms, just slowly moving. That was end of October, and saw some does moving through. So, I mean, obviously being adaptable, knowing what's going on in that time frame, seeing doe go through, need to get closer, and kind of do the same thing as a spot and stalk, except I kind of spot and stalked the trail that they were on to make sure that I was covered, not being open to anything in the area to see me. And just kind of got closer to this one specific Russian olive that I wanted to. And no sooner did I get there than I saw him coming right down that trail, right behind him. And that was like 15 yards on the ground.
That's awesome. I hadn't shot a buck off the ground, and then since I've been out here, I shot the mule deer buck off the ground the first year. I missed the mule deer buck off the ground the second year. 2019, I shot my biggest buck ever off the ground in South Dakota. So I think out west, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's because of the animals or the terrain or both, but it seems like a whitetail hunter can do a lot more ground hunting. And I'm not talking about out of a ground blind or even a man-made blind out of debris or whatever, but just straight ground hunting and natural terrain. There's a lot more opportunities, it seems like, out here.
Yeah, it seems like we always talk about, doing what the situation calls for. And back home, some of those situations that called for that ground hunt was pretty much impossible just because how thick that stuff was. Here, it can be super thick, but you have a lot of little breaks in between where you can't get those windows.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. Like in the Russian olives, like you're talking about, they're not always just a huge wall. You'll get kind of like a park. You'll get a little open meadow of grass within the Russian olives that might be 20 yards by 20 yards or timber that breaks them up. So
yep, and they're thick enough too that you can use them as a screen, to kind of move behind and whatever you need to do to get in that kind of a position. And then a lot of times too, those Russian olives have those the runways in between the two, and they pretty much will get right between the two and follow those two, kind of out.
And I don't know if I ever asked you this before, but when you shot that buck, just from what I know about seeing that type of vegetation, did you shoot under them or like between them? Because I know if you're in a tree stand, a lot of times it'd be hard to shoot down through those.
You're not getting through that.
But ground level, did you have a better view there?
Yeah. It was right between two main bushes, kind of a deal. It wasn't. I only had one window. I only saw one side of his his antlers, and that was enough to. Just seeing that one side was like, okay, I'm gonna take this guy, and I had no opportunity to even look at him or anything like that, just because as soon as you hit that window, I needed to hit that window, to execute that shot, and then if you would have taken one more step, that's done. He's gone.
Yeah, that's what's so tough about bow hunting. So often it's like a lot of times you got 5, maybe 10 seconds to decide, is that the one or is that not the one? Well, I think we covered the whitetail topic pretty good. Let's move on to our elk hunting experiences. But before we get into that, I think we ought to preface this discussion with a high-level overview of Montana's hunting regulations, which are very confusing.
You need a PhD.
Pretty much, or a law degree, or both. So this was all a bit of a mystery to me, even after reading the regulations. So for non-residents, if you guys are listening to this podcast, there are 2 different types of points available for purchase. The first type is a preference point, and accumulating preference points increases your odds of drawing a tag for whatever species you're applying for. So the more preference points you have, the better odds you have of getting your actual kill tag. However, Montana also has a lot of areas within the state that can only be hunted if a hunter possesses a permit for those special draw areas. And if a non-resident wants to hunt any of these special draw units versus the general units, and the special draw units generally have a better age class, or they're special draw because they have smaller populations and they can't handle the hunting pressure. But if you want to hunt special draw areas, you need to buy bonus points. And bonus points do not help you draw your deer or elk kill tag. They do help you draw a specific deer or elk unit. And those are only open by lottery drawing. So again, just a summary, preference points help you get your license or kill tag. Bonus points help you draw special hunting areas or districts. So that's the difference. I did not understand that when I hunted the first time as a non-resident, and even most of the first year. Luckily, Tim and I, we were only eligible for the regular general tag, so we didn't need to put in for any special draws or have any bonus points. So by the time we got around to the next year, we had figured that out. But it's a bit confusing if you're not from Montana. So with that out of the way, in 2019, Tim and I, we were not residents long enough for any of those special draws, but we were able to get resident deer and elk licenses because we had met the 6-month minimum of being a resident. So that September, deer and elk general season begins the first Saturday in September every year. So we hunted a general elk unit our first year. And that first year, Tim, let's talk about that a little bit. You actually, pretty short into the hunt, maybe even, was it the first weekend? You got a shot at a bull. So that was awesome because we were green. And I want to just tell this story real quick.
Can we skip it?
No. We're not going to talk about that too much. One of the things that I think is a real good tip if you're coming out west and how we learned about this area was Tim had called the biologist and they let Tim know about one of those block management areas, which is private lands that are open to public hunting. You either got to sign in or call the landowner depending on the block management type. But anyways, the biologist shared with Tim that there was a new area open and it had a lot of elk. So that's where we headed. And I remember we drove into this area the night before the opener. We parked, and that first night we heard a ton of bugles, and man, were we pumped.
Amazing. Actually, we didn't even get into the parking spot yet, and we saw those raghorns up on top.
That's right.
They were like right next to the road that we were going up in.
Yeah, so we saw like 3 bulls, and I don't know if you've ever seen 2 happier guys in your whole life.
Yeah, I mean, it was just kind of like, this is it. This is really going to happen. Like everything is about to come together. Yeah, we got up there, and I think we heard them from almost every single direction around us that night.
Yeah, we must have heard 3 or 4 different groups of bulls.
Yeah, and then we wake up.
Yeah, that was a miserable, absolutely miserable night. So this is our first year elk hunting, and it rained like torrential downpour, and my tent I thought was going to blow over. Because it was so windy, it was blowing my tent poles. And I was so excited. I don't think I hardly slept at all that first night.
Yeah, and woke up. We had a game plan going into the morning. We woke up, and that game plan was completely shot. It was like 30-mile-per-hour winds, and our visibility was 50 yards.
Yeah, that's being optimistic. Yeah. I think it was bad.
The fog, so we decided to look at the maps or the radar, and we saw that there was a window coming up, so we kind of just held tight. The wind eventually died down, and actually, so we were car camping. We were basically camping next to the cars, and what happened there? Oh,
I know what happened.
Yeah, so all of a sudden, wait, who was it? You or me?
I think it was me.
Yeah, it was you. Like, that's right. I remember that because I'm like, I was half asleep again, and I'm like, man, I thought I heard a bugle. Man, I'm an idiot. Like I'm daydreaming now. Here we go. And then,
yeah. So then the fog starts lifting, and we had been kind of nodding off because we didn't sleep too good that first night, and waiting for the rain to lift. And I think it was about 9:00.
Yeah.
So it was still raining a little bit, but the fog started lifting, and I look over, and 200 yards from where we're camping, there's like 15 elk and a pretty nice bull in there.
Yep. 2 greenhorns. We kind of just stood there trying to figure out well, this is awesome, but what do we do?
Yeah, we didn't have a whole lot of idea what to do in that situation. So did those end up running off? What happened? I don't even remember. I think we just let them work off, didn't we? Because we were going to try to catch back up with them.
Yeah, actually, I think that's what we did. We kind of let them get into the timber a little bit, then we tried to circle in around them. And
we never did see that specific group again that day.
No.
But let's talk about that area a little bit. So pro tip number 1 for guys that have been here a little bit, and you've talked to the biologist quite a bit and have good results. So call the biologist or call the game warden or both, and those guys are generally pretty helpful. I think the only downside to that is they probably tell everybody that calls the same thing.
The thing is, I think that I've gotten more and more information out of people, being way more specific. Don't hey, can you tell me about the elk herd, in this particular unit, and do your e-scouting, have your areas figured out first, and then have your questions lined out, just like you're doing an interview. I would actually give, an instance. This year I talked to a biologist in an area that we're going to try, and right now, Montana's in a huge drought, so my questions were, having to do with water sources, what happens in those dry years. Are those elk known to migrate? Which direction do they want to migrate during that time? Montana is a free range state as far as cattle. Figuring out what areas the cattle are going to be grazing on, and what areas the cattle won't be grazing on. Those cattle graze all the way up into those national forests. So that's something that has been a slow learning experience. Man, it's amazing. You're like, you get back 3-4 miles, and you're like, okay, we're back in there. You should be seeing some elk sign, and you do, but then all of a sudden you see a huge pile of cow crap. You're like, oh man. But that's just been one obstacle that we've had to deal with. But being more specific, know the drainages, know specific peaks and stuff like that. The more that you show that you've been doing your homework, not looking for a handout, I think they're a little bit apt to to give you a little bit more information.
Yeah. To summarize, ask better questions, get better answers.
Yeah, pretty much. Like this first year that we're talking about, our general, that guy, he kind of gave me those vague answers about some stuff, but then I kept on going on about what was going on about that? About 2 or 3 different drainages, and then I started talking about the calves, like where's the cows, where are the calving at, and this and that, and just getting a little bit more and more detailed. And the conversation went from like, oh yeah, there's elk over there, yeah, there's elk over here, it's a pretty good area over there, you do see a lot of pressure, to yeah, well, actually, you know what? Like, there's a lot of you do see a lot of cows and calves, over in this area. They do tend to come over here. Actually, over this drainage, if you look up along this, this high line, this elevation, that area tends to keep a lot of green grass. And so the guy really loosened up a lot. And then he's like, that's when he finally was like, he's actually, you know what? There's a new BMA that's going to be opening up over there too. I know, some of the surrounding private landowners have had issues with elk. So, and that kind of led everything into that area.
Yeah, and that's one thing. Well, 2 things I wanted to bring up. One real quick is you talked about cattle, and I had no idea how cattle and elk would interact. Mm-hmm. But we found out on more than one occasion that the elk don't mind the cattle or vice versa, because cattle have actually screwed us up several times.
Yeah.
And the bull that you shot at, actually, I thought the cattle had scared the elk off, but they didn't. So they'll get pretty close. But what Tim was talking about, the grazing, that is something to keep in mind, because if a spot's been grazed all summer, the grass is pretty well mowed down. Not to say that there won't be elk or deer in there, but it's probably, what's the cliche? Look for some greener pastures.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up is we were hunting a general unit, and of course it's going to vary wildly depending on where you're at in the state and the population. But I didn't have super high expectations for the general unit, and we saw an absolute pile of elk in that area that year.
Opening weekend, we got into that Beagle Fest. I got that spot and stock on that bull. Actually, the cattle that he just spoke about, spooking the bull off, I actually used them to close the distance. They don't mind them, and actually, I think they almost even use them, as an alarm.
Right.
Extra set of eyes or whatever, because they get spooked. They kind of do, but they're definitely not mingling, with each other. But yeah, we got that spot on stock on. That day we saw 3 different groups?
Yeah, I think opening weekend, if my memory serves me correct, and that was we only hunted there 2 days. We ended up seeing about 75 cows and I think 8 different bulls.
Yep. He got into the Beagle Fest, got the shot off, and then I think it was that last day, one of the bigger bulls must have came off the high country, and he started making his way down in, and we ran into that guy, which I dubbed him as I think both of us kind of dubbed him as the dinosaur, because he had a growl.
Real raspy bugle.
Yep. And again, general unit, so we hunted there for the 2 days, and actually when we were on our way out, there's more people coming in that day. So I think we went back there once more in September. That was when we went back in the middle. That's when we had the Beagle Fest.
Yeah.
We must have
heard 200 bugles in one day.
Easily.
Most of them on private, unfortunately.
Yeah, we could not get them to budge. They would get up, and you could hear them getting closer, but they knew about that property line. And then I ended up going back October 26th, which was the last day of archery season. And that was probably the most amazing day that I've ever seen. And it was a Beagle Fest. I went in there. I was tired. I had a Tinder date that night.
Oh,
and I turned that one down because I had to go elk hunting in the morning.
Yeah.
So
Priorities.
I had like 3 hours of sleep. And I think that's like a 3-mile hike back into that specific unit. And before sun came up, I had no intentions on even hearing beagles. I was going to do some glassing and try to get some spot and stalk in. And they were bugling, and I could hear the cows mewing. So it was dark out, and so I just got myself into a position, sat back, and listened to what direction they were heading into. So as they're making this, I'm listening to them. I'm on Onyx, trying to figure it out. I'm like, okay, they're going to go up here, here. Made a move, and the whole entire herd, I mean, you're 30, 40 elk came up through. They're all split. They're split up, they're not all single file line, but they all came up in front of me, and from anywhere between 75 yards to a couple hundred yards. But it was just the vocalization of them was ridiculous. They made it past me. I heard 2 rags. Well, I didn't know the rags then. I heard 2 bulls fighting. I could hear the clinking. I made the move. I got in close. I saw the 2 fighting, so I was focused on them. I did not look. Basically, between me and the 2 smaller bulls fighting, there was another one standing there, and there was too much brush in the way that I couldn't see that. I don't know why I did this. I decided to take a picture with my phone. So I had my phone in my hand, and as I did that of the 2 bulls fighting, that little rag popped up around the corner. So I had an arrow knocked, so as soon as he saw me, he kind of bounced off. I got drawn back. I dropped the phone, got drawn back, didn't get a shot off. Kept on hanging around all day long. I knew kind of what area they went into, and then later on that day, I heard them, or actually I spotted them up in the, they're getting up, moving. The dinosaur, he started bugling again, and I made a move all the way up to the top of the mountain, and I tried to get around on him. I bugled at him. I tried to get him, riled up. He would pace back and forth. He never break away from those cows. The cows started going downhill, down the mountain, so I ran all the way back down the mountain, and by now, I kind of had a better feel for the layout of the land, and there was a big cliff that you could either go, onto the east side of it or the right side of it, and I was on the east side of it, or the west side, so there's only one way for them to really go down through there, so I made the run all the way down around. By the time I got down to the bottom, the herd was already moving through. I got to like 40 yards, got drawn back, and I could not get a single elk to stop. I'm sitting there, meow, meow, going, and every time a bull would come through, I'm like, meow, meow, as loud as could be. And that dinosaur went ripping through there, and it was like the second or last cow elk. She stopped in that zone, in that little lane, and so the pen let her fly, but I'm headed a little too far forward, and I had blood for like 50 yards, and that stopped.
Yeah, you're pretty sure that was like a square shoulder shot.
Yeah, the sound of it, right. Just kind of like that. Yeah.
Well, to summarize, this probably wrap up the elk discussion, but if you're looking to hunt elk in Montana, don't be discouraged if you have to hunt general units, because if you do some of these things like call the biologist, call the warden, do your normal homework and e-scouting, read some stuff online, there's pretty good hunting and definitely in some of the general areas.
Do not go on Facebook and say, hey, how good is this area?
Right. Yeah, nobody's going to help you out there. Yeah. And obviously, we're not going to either.
No.
But
try Idaho.
Yeah, right. There's definitely some good elk hunting to be had. So lucky for us, we drew the special permit again this year, so we won't be hunting general areas. But if we have to in the future, I'm not discouraged by that at all. I think maybe the age class is a little lower based on what we've seen, but the numbers can still be real good in some of the general units. So
yeah, for sure. Well, actually, this year, are you going to talk about bear? We talk about that same herd.
Let's move into spring bear. So I want to start out the bear discussion by saying, and I think Tim will agree, we're very fair weather bear hunters.
Yeah. Not really, really into it, but it'd be cool to do.
Yeah. So I buy a bear tag because while elk hunting, and we've seen bears a couple times now, elk hunting. So if you have the tag and you want to put a stock on a bear, then you can do it. And did you spring bear hunt at all last year?
Mm-mm.
No, I didn't either. So this was our first foray into spring bear hunting. So we are not experts by any means, full disclosure. But we did pick up a few things this year. So if you want to go ahead and talk about our first spring bear hunt this year on the opener, how that went.
Yeah, so we went to the same spot that we went for a general elk hunt. That year that we went there, we saw that mom and cub And then one of the times that I was there, I ran into a boar. Oh, actually, and then another time, I think it was last year, or the year before, going back in there, I saw a chocolate phase. So I know there's bear in there.
Yep.
We also saw some sign. We get in there opening day. We get up to our glassing knob, and we're kind of like, doing some glassing, surveying the area. All of a sudden, it's like, is that a bugle?
Yeah, I thought he was joking at first.
And what was it, May 31st?
No, I think, what's bear open?
What is bear?
May 1st.
May 1st.
Yeah. Or is it April?
May 31st, or April 31st.
No, it closes May 31st.
April, it's like April 31st then.
Okay, we follow the laws, so whatever day spring bear open.
Whatever days on my calendar at home, that's when we go. That's
yeah,
when we
it's
went.
I think it's either April 15th or May 1st.
April 15th sounds about right,
Okay.
actually.
Anyways.
But yeah, anyway, so it's April, and all of a sudden, like, is that a bugle? And all of a sudden, a few minutes later, all of a sudden you hear that weak bugle again. So we get up and we kind of creep up over this little knoll, and sure shit, how many elk were out there?
Oh, it had to be like 70. It was a big old pile. No bears, a lot of elk though.
Yeah, no bears, a lot of elk, and they were just bugling and mewing, just carrying it on, having a good old time. And
I felt like one of those posts on Facebook that shows up in like the second week of October when the first buck starts grunting or the year-old buck chases. Rut's on.
The rut's on.
Yeah, rut was on in April.
Yep, definitely. It was a late rut this year out here, but yeah, that was our first trip, and then we didn't go out until a little bit later in the season. And
well, you went once by yourself.
Yeah, I went once by myself. I came across a nice chocolate, tried to make a stalk on it. That failed. Shell is horrible to try to stalk on.
Yeah, so talk about that a little bit. So you spotted this bear. Tim's a diehard bow hunter, so he's bow hunting. And during any big game rifle season, which rifle was open, you have to wear orange. So he's out there with his bow and his orange on, and the bear was uphill, right? Yep,
it was uphill. My hunting partner here was supposed to go with me. Basically, so what our plan is it
was my anniversary, so I wanted to live to hunt another day.
Fair enough. But yeah, so what our plan kind of is I got the bow, and Jeremy has the rifle. So if it's in a situation where he can take the shot, or basically if I can make a stalk, then we'll try that one. But if it isn't in a situation, kind of like what I found myself in, that's where he can take the long gun out, reach out and make the shot. So I was literally on my way back to the vehicle. Again, I think I did 11 miles that day. Weather was real crappy. I couldn't glass. I'd try to get to this point, and just could not see anything. And I was a little over a mile from the car, and I turned my head, looked up up this big park, and it was kind of a cliffy area, but I see movement, get the binos up. Sure enough, there's a big, chocolate phased boar, and I think he was like 237, perfect rifle range. Yeah. I tried to make the stalk on it. Like I said, it was shell on a steep slope just isn't good. You can't get footing. It's rocks are falling. But I did manage to get within distance of hearing a huff and him take off. So that was my second time out. And then the third time out, Jeremy came along, and Shauna came along too, which is real cool to have.
Shauna's my girlfriend, for anyone wondering who Shauna is.
She's always a riot to have along any type of adventure. But yeah, the three of us got out there, and we got up to a glassing spot. This isn't kind of your traditional spot. Normally you want to get up super high and glass down in to see more and more. This is kind of almost the same level as a lot of the places, so you're kind of limited, but you can see more than different areas than you can if you got super high.
Yeah, so our setup was we were in a drainage. We walked up one side of the drainage uphill, and then we were glassing across to the other side, which was still borderline rifle range, 400 or 500 yards, because it's kind of a tighter drainage. And that was the same general area you'd seen the bear the week before, correct?
Yep. We got up there, and of course that bear didn't show back up. But old Eagle Eye over here, he spotted a big old black blob a little ways away.
Yeah, so I think when we looked on Onyx, that bear, and the only reason I knew it was a bear is because it was a black dot that was moving, but it was like a mile and a half away, and I think we had about an hour and a half of light left, but the bear was way up, so we would have had to go down, walk a mile and a half, and a big climb, probably 800,000 feet, and then hope that it was still in this drainage. So our plan was to try to relocate him in the morning, and that didn't end up happening.
Mother Nature fooled us, actually. We got up probably like, an hour before light, and it was just horrible.
Howling wind.
It's
like
kind of
30 mile an hour, 40 mile an hour wind.
You can't make a shot in this, and this and that. So, we kind of bailed on it, and kind of just went back to sleep and stuff, and woke up like an hour after sunlight, and
just ideal conditions.
It's perfect. It's beautiful and sunny out. No wind. And, oh God.
Did I mention the part where we're fair weather bear hunters?
Yep.
So on a more serious note, though, in summary, I think we are far from bear experts, but what did we learn this year? I think one thing we learned is that for us, or at least the tactics we were employing, the second half of the season, towards the end of May, seemed a lot better.
Yep.
We didn't have much luck early on our early hunt there at all. So if I was going to bear hunt again this spring, which I probably will, I'd like to, I'm going to definitely target like those last 2 weeks of May, I think.
I think give it time to green up, let the bears spread out, let them get up moving. That's just my guess, And it just seems like more and more people I talk to who are into it more, they kind of wait for those last 2 weeks.
Yeah, for sure. That's kind of our overview of the species, but something else that's real important, and we mentioned this a few times, was block management areas. So I want to go over those a little bit. And if you're not familiar with the block management area, if you're not from Montana, you probably aren't, but a lot of states have similar programs. A block management area is privately owned lands that are open to the public for hunting, and in return for the private landowners opening up, the state pays the landowners a fee that varies on, I think, the size of the land, how many hunters they get. I don't know all the exact inputs in the formula, but private landowners get paid to let the public come hunt their lands. And from what I understand, this is a relatively new program, came out like the late 90s, and that's the state's attempt to prevent leasing from taking over all the private lands and to incentivize private landowners to allow public hunting. So there's two types of BMAs, and Tim, you've hunted a bunch of BMAs, right?
Yep, both of them.
Yeah, I have as well. So there's type 1 and type 2. So if you're looking at your Montana access book and you're planning your hunt, this is pretty important stuff to know. So a type 1 BMA simply requires that the hunter sign a card, and the card's got like your name, date, your vehicle type, your license plate, and then you sign that card, and there's a drop box that's generally located at one or several locations around the perimeter of the property. And that's it. You sign in, follow the laws. They're all walk-in access only. So you sign in and go on your merry way. And then a type 2 BMA, these require advanced permission, and that's obtained from the landowner and or the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks District office that presides over that region that the BMA is in. And type 2 reservations, Tim, they usually open, 1 to 2 weeks prior to the season, like the last week or 10 days of August.
Yeah, I think it's like the last week. Most of them will have they'll say right on. So the type 2s definitely, they all have their own specific rules. That's just set up by the landowner. For the most part, they open up about a week to 2 weeks beforehand. Now some of them don't even open up until the actual September opener. Yeah, so if you're looking for antelope hunting for that early antelope season, some of those places won't be open.
That's a good point. So most of the BMAs, I believe, open September 1st, and then deer and elk and regular antelope, not the early archery, but regular antelope, all open the first Saturday in September. But we've had some pretty good experiences on BMAs, and I know you can turn, there's a layer on an onyx. When you turn it on, it'll be the like red polka dot layer. Those are the block management areas, and if you're planning a hunt, you're going to want to look into some of those to expand your land access horizons. And the type 2s, so you've called a few, right? Did you call FWP or the landowners, or both?
So using Onyx there, clicking on that piece of land, a type is a type 2, and then clicking on their, I think it's information. So right now it's actually shut down. Every year, pretty much after turkey season, the block management areas will still show on Onyx, but if you click for the area info, it'll say not active or no info. That normally is updated when the access books come out. Anyways, you'll click on it. It'll tell you about the land, what's there to hunt, what their primary species are. But then it'll tell you to either go to the ranch, call the ranch headquarters, or reach out to FWP in that specific region.
Again, Tim mentioned a book. There's a book that you can request, and maybe you can download it too, but I think you maybe have to actually request it.
Probably is now because of COVID.
Yeah, but it'll give you all the block management areas in each district, and that's an invaluable resource. So if you're planning a hunt, you're going to want to get that book as soon as possible because, again, those type 2 where you got to get the permission from the landowner, those open up the last week of August, roughly. So you're going to want to know about those. So.
Also, too, like your type 1s, most of those you have to sign in daily. So some of those larger pieces, you have to, if you hunt them, if you're kind of camping close to it, a lot of them you can't camp on those pieces. But if you're planning on camping close to them every day before you go hunt them, you have to go back to that drop box, sign in. And then some of those type 2s, you can request it for like 2 or 3 days. But that also allows, like a certain, like they might allow 2 groups of 3.
Yeah, so the type 2s are definitely more restrictive. It's harder to get the permission. Not that it's hard. I mean, they're enrolled in the program, so generally if they're not booked, they'll give you permission. But there's just a little more planning and forethought that's got to go into those. Well, we're running up on an hour and a half here, so one last question, and we'll probably have Tim back on for sure at some point in the future. Not probably, definitely, but one other thing I wanted to discuss. What would you do 2021 Tim Bunao? What would you tell 2019 Tim Bunao? So you're coming to Montana. Now you got 2 years under your belt. Let's assume you were a local and you just moved here. What would you tell yourself? What's real important? And let's just think big picture, not necessarily species specific, but big picture. What would you tell yourself hunting in Montana?
Trying to think of my mindset coming out here. A million things I'd tell myself. I think for the most part, go ahead and do the things that you want to do. Don't. I think my first year I was just so gung ho on the hunting thing. I didn't go out fish often. I didn't. I was just so wrapped up on trying to be successful that first season. I would tell myself to get out and enjoy Montana some more. Not just your hunting activities. There's so much stuff to do out here. You're hiking. You're fishing. It's endless for an outdoorsman. I'm not just talking about outdoorsman as in the hunting and fishing person too. So
yeah, then you got Yellowstone and Glacier and all that stuff, the parks, and a lot of the good hiking, like you mentioned, is not even in the parks. There's a lot of stuff that we found since. So that's a good tip. What else?
As far as deer, I guess 2019 would be more selective. I guess you say then. Now that I've seen what Montana can have, especially during the rut, if I have the time, I'd be selective on it, on the whitetail, especially the rut. This year I waited. I was real selective this year. I got to see some amazing things that I've never seen before within the whitetail, the stuff that you'd see on, Realtree TV and stuff like that. So, and it almost paid off.
Yeah.
So
I totally understand what you're saying. So coming from Michigan, coming from New York, where you might see a buck that you're interested in shooting, and I'm not even saying a big buck. Most of the time, a buck I was interested in shooting would be like 100 inches or 110 inches. And in Michigan, because I was like in the middle part of the state, not a lot of trophy quality. The big thing that I realized is I might get 1, 2, maybe 3 good opportunities in the season in Michigan. And I was greener then. I've matured as a hunter some even since I left Michigan. But out here, you're almost inevitably going to get another opportunity at a good buck. Not that it's endless or infinite, but if something goes wrong, that wasn't your whole season. You're probably going to have 3, 4, 10 more chances, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Easier to be selective, I guess is what I'm saying.
Definitely. And I guess, the other thing too, just hunting in general. If you want to get it done a specific way, obviously, go for it. But I think you're just going to increase your odds if you're really open to being opportunistic with whatever the situation hands you and being able to read that situation, kind of a deal, whether it be that bull is really looking for a cow. That's just something that we've been learning, in general, like maybe they're beagling, they're talking to each other, not really actively seeking. So at that time frame, maybe focusing on water, doing something like a wallow sit or just even a water hole sit or, into that spot and stalk situation.
Yeah, that's a good point on the elk. So I'm going to make an analogy. I pretty much never used a call in Michigan because everybody was calling all the time. Not to say that they don't work, they can work, but I pretty much had abandoned calling. And I feel like for elk out here that our expectation, what you see on the TV, all the calling, the bugling, the cow calls, and what we found, I think, is that we were calling way too much the first year, and that we've learned that it's probably better to do, one, no calling if we don't have to, and then two, to start out with, like you talk about all the time, least aggressive and then ramp it up. Mm-hmm. Start with 1 or 2 cow calls minutes apart, not seconds apart, and then go from there.
It's easier to speak softly than get aggressive than to get aggressive and then tone it back.
Yeah. So I think that's a big lesson we've learned is start out slow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's probably a pretty good place to wrap it up for today. If people have any questions or comments about Montana specifically, I think we've learned about the rigs or whatever, throw a comment in there. I'd be happy to answer them to the best of my ability because, as we mentioned, it is super confusing.
Yep.
Learning the regs, especially each species got its own separate regs, different districts, just a lot of stuff. And I don't think we're experts, but we know a lot more than we did 2 years ago now.
Definitely willing to help, decipher anything like that. I think, I think everybody should get to experience Western hunting, whether it be Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, even Colorado. I think everybody should do it. I think it's in everybody's grasp to do it. It's just do it, man.
Yep. Make a plan, stick to it, commit to doing it. Sure, it costs money, but everything costs money, and It's not so expensive you can't do it. It's in the reach for most people.
You'll never forget that experience.
No, absolutely not. So, all right. Well, hey, Tim, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
I'm sure we'll have you back again, and I don't know about you, but pretty jacked to get out after these antelope in a couple weeks.
Yeah, just 3
weeks, I think.
3 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, so last year I filmed for Tim, and this year I got the archery tag, and Tim's going to film for me. So
yep.
Hopefully, if I don't blow it in a month or two, maybe we'll have some good antelope footage.
Hopefully. Yeah, you got it.
All right.
You got it.
Well, we'll catch everybody next time. Thanks for checking in.